Hello everyone, welcome to the very last talk of today. Hopefully not too tired, obviously about AI. And welcome to another talk about AI. So my name is Alex. Officially I'm lead DevOps engineer at Zencoder. I also double as DevRel, and in general what I like to call Dev Ask Me Anything. It's a startup, so you have to wear many hats. Now before we go into the actual presentation, I also would love to get a feel of the audience. Today, do we have technical people here? Can you raise? Okay, most of you are technical. Okay, nice. All right, so another question. Do you think AI will replace developers? Reduce.
Not well.
All right. Okay. All right, yes.
Depends on the time span.
Fair enough. Okay, all right. Yeah, well, I actually asked ChatGPT, the latest model, yesterday, if it thinks AI will replace developers or not. Of course, I said no, but it's maybe just AI being sneaky. But if you actually look at the headlines, the recent headlines, you can actually also see a lot of headlines like this. In this case, for example, it's Mark Zuckerberg saying, pretty much that AI will replace mid-level engineers, I think by 2013. And this was pretty recently, I think in January this year. And all those guidelines, all those predictions are nice until you kind of see them play out or not play out, right? Because especially self-driving cars or medical imaging has been predicted to be replaced by AI fully, and still we are not there yet. At the same time, self-driving cars is actually a good analogy for how AI can sort of modify or replace developers to some extent, right? So if you're not familiar with different levels of self-driving cars, there are basically 6 levels. This image is generated by ChatGPT, so it's a bit off, as you can see. But yeah, basically there are usually 6 levels of self-driving cars, starting from no automation at all. So basically, just a regular car without any help, without any support from the computer, all the way to full automation, where the self-driving car can move on its own, possibly without any human intervention at all, at any conditions, at any time, basically. And yeah, as I said, this image is generated by AI, so unfortunately, it still doesn't know how to properly center the images and whatnot. And just a small little joke for the technical people here. Yeah, basically, even though AI is supposed to replace us all, it still can't even properly fit the text into the image. Now let's see how we can apply these sort of levels, right, to the coding. And we will go a bit into the history, and by history I mean a couple years back, pretty much 3 years, because in AI, history is on that scale, right? It moves pretty fast. So, and then 3 years ago, you probably heard about Copilot. It was released in October 2021. It was pretty much just essentially an LLM wrapper. So basically it was essentially like a autocomplete on steroids. It didn't provide much of the help. It tried to autocomplete, and sometimes it would create some crazy responses, pretty much like any autocomplete would in Google, for example, or in general in your phone, right? Yeah, it was helpful to some extent, right? It was actually more sort of like a nice Google search in a sense, but it was in your development environment, so you could just ask questions, could get autocomplete, which did improve performance of some developers to some extent, right? But still it wasn't good enough. Then in the following couple years, we got to sort of level 2 of coding assistants, where they are already becoming more intelligent. They now understand the whole project. They can perform some simple coding tasks. They can try to generate documentation. So basically they are becoming more intelligent. And this is pretty much the typical things that you can expect from those assistants, right? So they can generate code, they can optimize code, they can refactor code, they can generate documentation, and maybe even help you fix errors if you have any in your code. Yeah, you basically could also use AI to just generate a bunch of code, a bunch of text, and then spend several days trying to make sense of that generated code, and possibly with the help of another AI, make it work, or maybe you would just discard all those generated text and write it yourself. And this is actually the same as people reported. So there are some stats on how people perceive the help of AI until recently, right? So a lot of people reported that they at least perceived to be more productive, right? So I think 88% people perceive productivity improvement. They felt more confident and so on. So there are definitely a lot of benefits to using AI at this level 2. At the same time, if you look at the negative side, on the longer scale, you would see that actually all those perceived productivity gets sort of reduced because the generated code will become obsolete pretty quickly. Yeah.
The statistics, which day for that?
It was which year? See, I think it was, there are several links, I think most of them are base 34.
I can share the links after the talk. But yeah, it's pretty recent. So it's mostly based on Copilot and similar tools. So in phase 24, which there are a lot of them, obviously. So yeah, even though people perceive on the short scale that they become more productive, on the longer scale, a lot of the code generated by AI become either obsolete or become deleted or become rewritten just because the quality is subpar. And the reason for that is, well, LLMs, basically, all assistants are working based on LLMs, and the LLMs are trained to predict the next probable symbol, right? So basically, let's say if we type bon, right, then the most probable the next symbol would be either bonjour or bonsoir, and sorry for my French pronunciation. So, and those models, those LLMs, they are trained on large-scale open source data. So anything that is available online on open source, they can train on it. And let's say some model or some library is more popular in the open source, or even you might have your own company frameworks, your own company library, which is not open source, which is only available for your company, for your developers. Then LLM pretty much would fail to predict good results, good code based on these libraries. But it would prefer more popular frameworks based on the open source data, just because the probability of getting the probability of those frameworks is higher based on the training data. And this leads basically to multiple failure modes, which LLM tend to have. So things like, first of all, they struggle with logical reasoning, and they fail to utilize facts, which sometimes can be worded in a bit weird fashion, like in this case, Tom Cruise is a mother's son. It does sound a bit off to the human ear. At the same time, it's pretty straightforward, right? We all understand what it means. At the same time, LLM can fail pretty much miserably after 10 seconds on this simple, although worded a bit weirdly, question, right? And this one was from last year, from 01 preview, which at that time was supposed to be the smartest. It was thinking for 10 seconds for that. But actually, if you look at the latest model, GPT 4.5, it says pretty much the same result. It's a bit different, right? But still, it is failing to pretty much understand what's going on, right? And of course, when we're talking about real life world, about real life requirements from the clients, from the product managers, those things can be quite confusing, even for people, let alone for LLMs. Now, another thing is, as I mentioned, LLMs are trained on open source data, so they basically work good as long as you do something that is already available in open source, right? So if you write code, if you write text, which is similar to what can be found online, they are fine. But once you switch to using something internal, like internal libraries or whatnot, they start to fail just because they don't know anything about this code, about this documentation, and so on. And one more thing is they are they exist somewhere in the cloud. They don't have access to your local machine. They don't have access to your environment. So they can't basically run the code, right? They can generate the code, but we as developers, when we write the code, we also try to run it, for example. We try to run tests, and LLMs can do that, right? They live somewhere in the cloud, and they don't have access either to internet or local machine or whatever. So basically, as I said, basically every time you try to use any internal library, internal documentation, even some Notion pages which are not available online or not available as open source, LLM will pretty much fail just because it doesn't have any knowledge and it can't utilize this sort of hidden knowledge from your company. With that, we are basically switching to level 3, and we are where we are now, right? So at this stage, what we call is junior software agents is the stage where LLMs or assistants can now solve some simple coding tasks. They can solve bugs, simple bugs. They can also have access to your environment, to environment of the developer of your computer, and they can use that to their advantage. So they can do, for example, a web search. They can run the code. They can run the tests. Pretty much, they can sort of mimic a junior developer. And there are two main things which enable this improvement, this step up to level 3. First of all, of course, the models. The new models are coming up, right? So this one, for example, is for Gemini, from a recent release of Google for Gemini 2.5 Pro. And as you can see, of course, the new model is better on the benchmarks compared to other models. Well, in most benchmarks. Here specifically, I highlighted 3 coding benchmarks where Gemini didn't perform as good as other models, right? So I think only either Polyglot was performing better compared to other models. But the problem with those benchmarks actually is they don't really reflect real-life world. So basically, if you look, for example, at either Polyglot, if you look at SVBench, they all focus on single file modifications, whereas in reality, developers usually need to modify multiple files. They might modify files across multiple projects, so it's not really... those improvements of models are not translatable one-to-one to the real-life world, just because benchmarks are not mimicking real-life world good enough. So that's obviously models still become better at writing code, but that's not the only factor which sort of moves us to the level 3. The second part is the AI agents, and you probably heard that today a lot about the agents. I think probably half of the talks today mentioned to some extent AI agents. But just to be on the same page, let's define what it is. And AI agent can be defined as a software that performs tasks on behalf of the user. On its own, this sounds pretty much like any software, right? Me pressing on the button here is pretty much software performing slide switching on my behalf, right? The main difference of agents from the classical software is that they follow the following agentic principles or patterns. They can use tools, right? So they can do web search, they can execute code. They basically can access any tools at their disposal to be able to help perform the action they were asked to do. Then they also do planning. So unlike classical software, they can create a plan, they can follow the plan, they can also reflect on the plan. So they can basically not just outline the steps, but they can also think about these steps, adjust them, see how they reflect the reality, and so on. And of course, you can also have multi-agent collaboration, where basically multiple agents can work with each other. They can critique each other. They can work on either creating the plan together, or again, as I said, critique each other's plan, and then come up with a better solution towards solving the goal. And if we actually look at how developers spend their time, we will see, and this is based on the research done on page 15, I don't think much has changed since. So basically, if we look at what developers spend most of their time at, we will see that most of the time is spent on the understanding. It could be understanding the code, it could be understanding the requirements, could be understanding of colleagues, I guess. And only 5% is spent on actually editing the code, right? Now, if we juxtapose the agentic patterns with this diagram, we will see that, for example, for tool use, of course, we have UI interactions, right? We do need to spend some time outside of IDE, and you probably need to use tools to edit the code. And we also probably need to have some understanding of what we are using tools for, right? Of course, for planning step, for agents to be able to plan, they need to understand what's going on. They need to understand the requirements. They need to understand the code base, the project. And of course, they might need to spend some time outside of IDE and navigate around and so on. For reflection, of course, again, you need to understand the requirements. You need to understand the state of the code of the project to be able to reflect on the plan, to be able to reflect on the task and so on. And last but not least, of course, multi-agent collaboration. Developers usually work in teams, and they usually tend to collaborate with each other, hopefully. So basically, all the things which developers do in the real life world can be pretty much applied to all the different agentic patterns. And this basically, enables sort of those headlines which I've shown in the beginning, where people are starting to say that that software or AI will soon replace developers just because AI agents basically follow the same, I guess, the same guidelines, the same principles that we as developers use in everyday life, right? And this is true to some extent, right? So as I said, level 3 software can help developers fix bugs. It can help developers be more productive. And one such example is, what we do at Zencoder. We basically develop a plugin for VS Code jailbreak, so you can use agents right inside your IDE. And let me actually quickly show what you can leverage Zencoder for. Let me switch to somehow to VS Code over here. Let me move it. Don't want to move. I think I need to. Second. Got. Okay. Right. So basically, I have some project open here. It's an open source project, and what level 3 coding assistants allow you to do is, for example, you can link a Jira ticket directly in the IDE and ask it to solve it. So let's see. It's a bit hard for me to type blindly without. Yeah. So here, for example, I mentioned the Jira ticket, which defines some task. I don't need to specify anything more. I just link the ticket. I can ask it to solve it, right? Solve it. Create a branch, code demo, checkout, and commit changes. So basically, what I'm asking to do is pretty much follow what developers usually do when they solve a ticket. They look at the Jira ticket. Let me start running it. They look at the Jira ticket. They change the code. They implement some feature. They fix the bug and so on. And as you can see here, it starts first with trying to understand the project. Let me zoom a bit more. So basically, first it tries to understand the project, which is pretty much what developer would do, right? Especially if they see the code base for the first time. Try to find any relevant files which might be useful for this Jira request, for this Jira ticket, for this request to be able to fix. And then basically, I ask the agent to follow the same work developers usually would do. They would save the changes, commit the changes, and then basically push the changes to the remote repository. As you can see, we already starting to see some changes, some code changes. Now, the nice thing about our agents is that you don't need to basically sit and watch. Of course, you can, and a lot of people say that they like to see how the agent thinks, how the agent sort of does it work. But you can actually switch to another chat and run another agent, and you can, for example, generate the tests. Nobody likes writing tests, so you can basically ask agent to do a lot of repetitive, a lot of mundane tasks on your behalf, and this is what basically enables again those headlines. Just because developers are offloading, but they can offload a lot of repetitive, a lot of mundane tasks, which would otherwise occupy a lot of their time, to more creative tasks, right? So basically here we didn't write any line of code, but we asked the agent to do unit tests for us. We asked it to implement a feature for us. And what is nice also, as I mentioned, level 3 agents, level 3 software coding systems, they can interact with your environment. They can interact with your local machine. So in this case, for example, once we generate the tests, we select all of these. Once we generate the tests, we can also actually try to run it, to compile it. In this case, it's not applicable, but we can try to run it and see if they actually work. So basically, the agent then can reflect on its work and see, for example, if the tests fail, the agent will fix them, and let's see if they will work out of the box or not. So let's apply the changes. All right, and we can run them. Let's see if they work from the first attempt or not. So I think it looks like this test has passed. You can see all of that's passed. So we didn't need to, our agent didn't need to do anything more on top of that. But of course, if the test would fail, it would go ahead and try to fix either the tests or the original code, depending on the source of the error. And we can at the same time check back to the other second agent, which was running somewhere over here. Yeah, as you can see, it went through all the process which usual developer would go through to eject the files, found the relevant files, did modifications, did this git add git commit, so basically committed all the changes to the remote repository. And one other thing which I sort of instructed the agent to do in my specific case is Slack me. So every time it finishes the task, it will send me a Slack message. Let's see if I can show it here. This one. All right. Well, yeah. I have some screenshots on the slide, but basically I can ask agent to notify me. I can ask agent to interact with me, and you can leverage also this to give it more clarifications, more requirements, and so on. So basically, this makes the level 3 already more interactive and more helpful for you as a developer, just because it's not blindly just spitting out what it learns from open source. It can also actually check that this thing works. It can check, it can interact with you as a human. It can pretty much do a lot of things on top of just generating the text, generating the code, or predicting the next symbol, basically. Let me go back to the slides. Yeah.
This was with which kind of technology we are Copilot for?
So that's us, Zencoders. Yeah.
And which models are using?
We use a mix of models. We use both third-party providers. We also have in-house models, so it's pretty much a mix of everything.
Which could be interesting, really. Test stuff in a relatively common way and locally. So,
yeah. Yeah, exactly. Some models work better on some steps, but then other models work better for different steps. So that's why we sort of mix and match to find the best models. Let me go back to the slides. Let's see, present review. Okay, this one should be here, and this one should go full screen. Let's see if I can. All right. Yeah, but basically, the Slack messages look like this. Every time the agent finishes a jury issue, every time it finishes a present test, it basically slacks me every time, and sometimes it feels like this. Now you can, of course, tell the agent to not message me, but your product manager or your boss, instead of yourself. And this also kind of already helpful, right? It already can reduce a lot of workload. And there was the beginning, there was a nice mentioned that it will reduce number of developers, but won't fully replace them. And you can already see why. That's because people or developers are already able to focus on more creative tasks, more high-level tasks, and then offload things that usually would be uploaded to junior developers. They can be uploaded to AI, and that's also why we call level 3 as a sort of junior software agent. That's because you have these sort of junior virtual developers essentially. Now, if you're talking about level 4 and level 5, they are pretty much in line with the self-driving cars. Level 4 is something that is already autonomous to some extent. It can run on its own, but still it would require some input from humans from time to time. It still would require some checks from people from time to time, depending on the complexity of the task, depending on your actual setup, and so on. And of course, those predictions or the dates are, as we've seen in the beginning, sometimes not very accurate. But this is something that I think industry is quite quickly going towards. And I think later this year or early next year, we will already see a lot of autonomous agents running somewhere in the cloud, solving the tasks for you. So essentially, you as a product manager can just tag an agent in some bug ticket, and it will fix the bug. It will implementing a simple feature for you, and you don't even need to be able to code basically. And then the level 5 is something that is pretty much on the same full autonomous self-driving car level, where agent is not only able to interact internally with your company, with your code base, but it can also interact with your users. It can interact with your can poll the users. It can somehow check their inputs and so on. So basically, it would be able to cover the whole software development lifecycle, all the way from ideation to putting things in production, and then validating that they work their production as well for users and whatnot. And of course, it is in the AI everything moves better, so that's why I put 2026, 2027. But there are, I think, a lot of still kind of roadblocks for that. But of course, again, as I said, Copilot was released just 3 years ago, and we already went from level 1 to level 3, something that took cars, I think probably, quite a bit longer, right? And we are still not there yet. And yeah, basically, yeah, so developers, I guess based on the prediction, developers have 2 years left, right? Well, there is some truth to that. Again, as that people can already offload some simple tasks, some bug fixes, some mundane tasks like documentation, testing, and so on to the agents. And of course, you can think about this in 2 ways. Sort of, maybe you are happy about this, that AI will finally replace you, or developer side, and you can follow your lifelong dream of being a good farmer in this case, for example. Whatever your heart wants, right? But well, at least one job is still safe, and that's because AI still needs to have a lot of data to train on. So there is still a job of writing the code for AI to train on, of course. No, but seriously, yeah, I think what we are moving towards, and as sort of properly was mentioned in the beginning, we are moving more towards sort of true Copilot in a sense, right? So AI won't fully replace developers. It will pretty much like with any industrial revolution, if you will, it will evolve the jobs we have. It will automate a lot of tasks. As I showed, it can already automate writing documentation, can automate writing unit tests, and this also will require some written skills. Just because people or developers now will be able to be more functional. So they would be able to basically cover 4 different roles, right? So they would be able to cover both for DevOps engineers, they would be able to cover for backend, for frontend, whatever, right? So basically they would be able to not fully replace server. Yeah, full stack. Yeah, pretty much. Yeah, but in more broader sense. Yeah. So basically, you can imagine one person serving for a single agile team in a sense, right? Just because it can offload some of the tasks. Some of the tasks he or she doesn't know how to do. Can offload them to AI, ask it to deploy something to production, while the developer themselves you can either oversee what AI generates or write the code maybe themselves. So basically, it won't fully replace. It will make
Maybe we have the new languages, right? The new programming language designed by the AI is the AI library. Oh, writing Java, writing Python, and things like that.
Yeah. I mean, this happened pretty much like after initially, like everybody was written in assembly, and then the more high-level languages came up, and everyone was saying that these will now make the developers obsolete or whatever, and easier or whatever. And yeah, that's definitely something that probably will happen. The languages might become more natural language like things. And you'll already see that with prompting here, because of course, at least for now, you need to also know how to properly prompt the LLMs, because even a single word, a single change of the word can lead to difference in the results, to drastic changes in the difference. So yeah, definitely a lot of new jobs will come up. A lot of jobs will be transformed. And at the same time, I think so the developers will be augmented by these. Pretty much the same as with any industrial revolution, I guess, in a sense, right? When the steam engine was invented and so on. Well, of course, some jobs became obsolete. Right? At the same time, a lot of new jobs came up to be. A lot of jobs became more efficient in a sense, right? And this is what basically happening with AI as well, with the developers using AI. And of course, you also want to be to adapt these things sooner rather than later, just to be, I guess, sort of on the top of the wave rather than being solved by it. And yeah, basically, we as developers would be more of a managers, virtual developers, rather than us writing the code. We would be just reviewing what they did, and we will be, pretty much managers of a huge army of virtual developers, in a sense. Yeah.
What about the security of our thing if we use such
That's a good question, and security is definitely something that I think suffers right now, and you probably, especially with the vibe coding. I think you've seen there was recently on X, there was a recent post when somebody wipe coded the SaaS solution, and then suddenly all the bad things started to happen because one of our competitors who they used for vibe coding, it basically leaked the keys, all the API keys. So yeah, I think security is definitely something that will be much more important going forward, especially with a lot of AI generated code, and especially with people not checking the code, of course. But at the same time, as I've shown, the code, the AI doesn't just generate the code, it can also use a lot of tools to check the code, right? So there are a lot of tools which can do security checks, like security code analysis and whatnot, like Sneak or SonarQube. So basically AI would be able to use those tools to check the code first. But then of course, I think there are a lot of other potentials for improving the security. First of all, the current models are trained on open source data. The open source data sort of risks a lot of vulnerabilities. So we might as well also adjust the training data, the training process, to make AI more look into more secure solution, for example. Right. So basically, there are definitely a lot of possibilities there, a lot of options to improve AI, both improve AI, but also improve on our process of security.
Okay, but generated this code with ER, it's not a protected code. It used on other sides more. It's the question is how to protect our code. when using it.
So,
IT security or IT?
Who is now the code?
Yes, it's not about technical security. It's about in legal code of our enterprise. We capture and when using this EMGA, we share our code and it's not legal.
So yeah, better. So there are, I guess, two things here. So first of all, models, as I mentioned, are trained on open source data, which comes in different licenses like MIT, Copilot license, or whatnot. So there is one aspect here where LLM can spit out copyleft code. Then this will, in comparison, this code with the code base might not be something that you as a company would want, right? So that's one aspect. But then, of course, on the other hand, indeed, to get the response from LLM, you need to send the code to the cloud provider, unless you host the models locally. But that's sort of another story which requires a lot of resources. Well, I mean, of course, you can be more paranoid and not trust the legal, the sort of terms and conditions, right, of all those providers. But in general, from legal point of view, usually, this, for example, in our case, we have the conditions set in terms of conditions, terms of services, but we don't train on the data, and our providers also don't train on the data. So yeah, there are of course a lot of different sides to that, right? But on the sort of high level, this is sort of the first line of defense, I guess, from your code leaking to the models, to the outside world, but also on the other hand, the code itself is usually not something that would, I guess, help your competitors, right? Because let's say the code of Miro or the code of BNP Paribas would leak, right? It doesn't mean that you would get a lot of new banks being created from this code, right? You still need a lot of other things on top of that.
Yes, but for concurrence, it's the price.
Yeah. No, yeah. As I said, there are a lot of different sort of sides to that. Yeah. But
it's just maybe a dumb question because I'm not coding more since many years. But what's the difference between your solution and Cursor of WinSap, which is being acquired by OpenAI?
yeah. Right, so Cursor and Windsurf are basically standalone IDEs, first of all, right? So you need to install a separate app to use them. And that is something not everybody would be happy about, especially if we are talking about people who write in Java, in C++. They usually use IntelliJ IDE, for example, right? So they wouldn't like to switch to another application, basically. That's one thing. There's also a recent move from Microsoft to ban all of the forks of VS Code, which can also hinder the progress of those forks of Windsurf or Cursor. But then on top of that, we also, first of all, we basically go where developers are and we focus on what developers need the most. And we'll also integrate into all the systems which developers usually use. So it's things like Sentry, GitHub, GitLab, whatever. And yeah, and of course, on benchmarks, we also pretty much on the top. If you're talking about quality of the code, so yeah, there are pretty much a lot of aspects. And if you're interested to see if we can help your company, for example, we can talk after the talk. Okay, basically.
Can you give us an idea of the productivity you can gain with intensive usage of this type of tools compared to planning development?
Well, the main productivity gain would come from basically developers outsourcing any repetitive tasks to AI. So I already mentioned documentation, right? Usually you need to spend a lot of time on writing documentation, and for that, of course, you need to also understand the code and whatnot. And or writing tests, right? And for example, one of our users,
in terms of numbers, that means that you can do the job of any developer with the draft 2 developer with one, or
it really depends on your company. For example, one of our clients, she mentioned that we cut her sort of working time in half. That's because she was writing a lot of unit tests. So I guess she was spending like for most of her days writing unit tests. And with the Zencoder, you kind of essentially one click and write the AI will write the test for you. So you now can focus on more low-grade tasks, more fillable tasks, and these bots I guess has improved productivity for because your flow with all the replaces tasks, you should not need to spend more time on, right? At the same time, developers are more hacky, and this also can help boost productivity because they don't focus on routine tasks, they focus on more interesting low-grade tasks. So yeah, again, in those numbers, it really depends on the company. So usually for large companies, they have a lot of legacy code. It's ideally would need to be converted, and companies spend years on that. With tools like with AI, with tools like us, for example, with our free tools, you can cut this from years to months or weeks, again, depending on the companies.
and is the term of that's will depend because if you consider code, it is creativity. The language user the code is easier. We have to see what could be interesting things in the because people like you looking at what who love code. And when you say you will not be able to code anymore because this AI will code better than it and much more better than it if you are a baby developer. It is acting search for others that can the job of the job of engineering purpose, right? But I have another question. What about the beginners? What about students? I have a lot of students of I did course that I and so on. And honestly, I'm not sure providing the right answer. What is the position tomorrow? Because if we don't AI both for that they will not code anymore, for they will not be able tomorrow to debug, because I believe that those who you persist or to resist, those who will understand the program to have it prepared and help you debug and manage the local patients. And the business will not have this change because they will be obliged to use AI agents directly, for they will lose this capability to debug and understand the code. And what we think about this, what is opulent opulation?
That is definitely a good but also tough question first, because first of all, if we, I guess, sort of remove junior developers, right, from the creation, we won't be able to get senior developers because we need to go from junior to senior. At the same time, I don't think students need to stop learning software engineering, right? You still need to understand what goes on, right? You still need to review what AI produce, and to review, you need to understand. You need to at least be able to read the code and understand what's going on.
And it's not writing, right? When I began my career or 25 years ago, people were telling me if you are not able to disassembly or the memory of your program, you are not a good coder. And but I think it's not popular. And I never had to do that. So I'm not sure it is teaching because it's because talking about creative. It's not depending on optimizing. When you are working about C++ or even assembler, it's about optimization. Or we are not talking about sensing here, we're talking about creating the code much more thousands better than the test developers in language ones. So we are not talking about the Empire Tree, but you are not talking about sensing. Like really talking about creative. So you have just the web of AI like you for no more free kits and you have the application deployed. Not only even DevOps, you have a lot of the issues about that. So I understand, but we have to just to understand that I'm not talking about the same level of innovation.
Yeah, well, I mean, on the creative side, of course, AI is also not at the level of humans, at least for now. Right, so that's why when I'm talking about developers offloading mundane tasks and focus on creative functionality, that's because also AI still can do that. so they can focus more high level on architecture or whatnot, and then just save time on those repetitive tasks. But yeah, that's true that to be able to actually focus on these crazy tasks, writing architecture or whatnot, you need to have some experience in that, right? You can get experience without actually working. So definitely the next few years will be the simple students. But yeah, so I don't think they would need to stop learning software engineering because still the basic concepts are something that will be there for at least for some time, right? In some form or another. Even if we would go to natural languages like we discussed before, still you need to understand what's going on. At this again for now, and there are again different levels of understanding. Let's say you are a product manager, you don't need to understand how is working. You just need to also get a vibe, I guess, some right of the product, of how it works, of how it looks, how it clicks, basically. But if we are talking about more low stuff, still indeed you need to be able to understand, and this is where the sort of classical software engineering knowledge come in. So there are of course again a lot of different sides to this. Again, pretty much as with every, I guess, industrial revolution, right? You get a lot of shift in the paradigm, and people do need to find. Well, some people do need to find a way to adapt and change. But this is what it is, I guess. All right, so I should have switched results like a long time ago, but basically, if you want to try the Zencoder, you can check out the left QR code. If you want to connect, and if you heard any questions left, you can use the right. Is it right? So vice versa, okay? Basically, if you want to connect, feel free to use last QR code. Right. Any more questions? Yeah.
So, what percentage of Zencoder code is written by Zencoder? Do you track them?
We didn't actually. We didn't actually calculate, but we do use Zencoder to Zencoder. That's true.
You point out Israel and one of the they post that in every I know.
We didn't have time yet to do that. Unfortunately, we focus more on pushing about this.
Yeah, who is doing it? Either.
At the same time, I think the recent post of them, they mentioned it's like 90% of the code is written. Feels kind of, I don't know.
Spoke on this, right? It's an open source project, AIDER. Okay, was. I see it. Well, there you go.
Like,
So what's developer based or more like startup based? And if the question is on my mind, if they get to your insight about I work on startup and more startup obviously working a lot with AI, but the way I can only see it is that these bigger AI companies kind of dominating the world of AI, and smaller companies are utilizing other people's technology. So it's like the feature of like innovation and startups, to me, honestly, they don't say it's all because if all these people making all these different cool products, but ultimately it's a longer term kind of feature where you don't need quite a few companies controlling kind of, because their technology is going to be much more advanced than what the startup thing you can do over time, and but the very changes. We don't know. What's your thoughts on that?
Well, I mean, it really, I guess, depends on the sort of area of the type of business. Because of course, for example, OpenAI or Anthropic, they focused mostly on general models, right? So they can't cater to every small side of the business, basically. And there are a lot of opportunities on that side, of course. So basically, small companies being able to leverage OpenAI, Anthropic, or whatever, to focus on specific smaller pain points of the larger companies, which otherwise wouldn't be very interesting for their OpenAI. Right? So they have about 80 billion valuation. They don't need to focus on market which costs only 1 billion. Right? Doesn't matter for them. It's not their main area of expertise. It's not a main area of business. So there are still a lot of opportunities for small startups to focus on things which are sort of outside of the interest of those companies, basically. Although indeed you see a lot of movement from, again, OpenAI, for example, like it was mentioned that they are acquiring Windsurf, but at the same time, it kind of, to some extent, makes sense because they horse write code, so it makes sense for them to also focus on that side. But still, I don't think OpenAI or Anthropic or whoever would sort of monopolize the whole market. There is still a lot of things to be able to do on top of AI, and of course, again, there would be some shift in what those things would look like, maybe in 10 or 20 years, but I don't think there would be any monopoly of one single AI company. It's pretty much like when Google came up, right? They're trying to be in every sphere, but they are now, you see how they start to shrink some of the smaller or less profitable areas of the company. That's because it doesn't make sense for them as a whole large company focus on these smaller ones. They still get more, I think, money from ads rather than from anything else. So
Just curious. Thanks.
okay. Any more questions? Yeah.
You mentioned so they are like reviewing the code that the agent produces. Do you actually still review the code that it produces it?
Well, it depends on, I guess, on the task and your specific mindset, right? So, of course, it's all about vibe coding, where people just still feel the vibe, I guess, on the code, rather than is it actually checks, give it a work, if it's written well or not. But if you're talking about larger companies, like especially if you're talking about production, right, those security-bound companies like a banking or whatever, you still probably would want to have all levels, all the players of checks. Just because, again, as we said before, there are some legal implications. There are also some security implications which potentially can affect the company. It's not clear who to blame in this case, right? Should it be OpenAI? Should it be from the developer we use?
Yeah, I think it becomes reviewed by AI if you want it. So there's one that told about that as you from then you have specialists doing on substituting to allow them to be do social like a band on the visual 80 line that's the whole pods. As you say, please look at the project seems like the test that is to have the comments, but if you don't have the test, then we have to put it in the lines.
Yeah. Okay, yeah, especially like you mentioned the tests. It's I also seen a couple times when for example agent would get the tests training, but then instead of fixing the actual value in the test, which was at fault, it would go ahead and fix the code at the end, so that it passes the test, which is not something that you would want, right? This is just because the sort of a reason and the consequences that you pay out of work here. So yeah, there's definitely a lot of still needs to polish the review. You can't still upload it completely to AI. Also, you can sort of, I guess, help people do that. Again, through AI or through use different tools and so on. So again, I mentioned Sneak or any static code analysis, which can basically be connected to AI. So then AI can act on top of that knowledge from those tools.
I looked at, for example, Microsoft Whisper. No, Amazon, them is something really key that's coming and so on. One of the things they are doing is that agents we do the additional APIs and they use these APIs in order to be empowered. So either this Panther uses a test APIs for a code that be done by agents. It means the agent will read only a repository, know that there are functions that exist, build them, connect, load operations. Nice. Yeah.
Again, it's pretty much all about using the tools at the disposal, and you can, as humans, we use tools to get the knowledge, to get the context. Right, so we go to Jira, we go to Wikipedia, whatever, right? We do web search, and that's pretty much the same as with agents. They can get your knowledge basically from internet or from whatever knowledge basically they give them. So yeah. Okay. Yeah. Right. So I think we are at the time.
Thank you very much. Thank you.